One of the most common questions I get asked on my channel are, Joseph, what books are you currently reading right now? Or what are your favorite investing books? Or what are those books behind you on your bookshelf? Well, the time has come. We are going to answer all of those questions with a investor books tier ranking list. I'll be going through 18 of the most commonly known investing books and ranking each of them from best to last, from S tier to F tier. So this is going to be a nice in-depth video going through each of these, and I'll give a quick synopsis of what these books are, as well as my personal recommendations out of all of these books. So without anything further, let's go ahead and get started. We're going to start off with The Intelligent Investor. I am going to put this not as S tier. I know, that's shocking. Don't sling your arrows at me right now. I'm not going to put it as A tier. I'm going to put it as B tier. Now, you may believe it's some type of mortal sin to put The Intelligent Investor as B tier and not S tier. After all, it's Benjamin Graham, the father of value investing. It's Warren Buffett's favorite, most influential book in person. Benjamin Graham personally taught him. So a lot of investors, I believe, feel pressured. They feel pressured by the aura of The Intelligent Investor. They feel pressured by Buffett's story to rank this book higher than it deserves. And that's what I'm going to argue right now. The Intelligent Investor is frequently recommended to new investors when it shouldn't be. The book is incredibly long, dense, difficult to get through. I don't believe it's that particularly interesting. And on top of that, a lot of the dense information in the book is not applicable to today. A lot of the techniques and strategies that Benjamin Graham used when the book was published in 1949 are not even close to applicable today. They simply don't work. And Benjamin Graham himself has said they don't work before he died. He said a lot of the formulas and processes are not applicable to today's market. Yet this book is still one of the top admired, the top recommended books because of the aura that it has. In my opinion, I do not believe The Intelligent Investor should be recommended to new investors. I think the book has many things that are not applicable anymore. There are still some timeless concepts in it, but I think there's better books. So I rank The Intelligent Investor firmly in the B tier category. I think it was S tier when it was released, but not today. Now, another book that was released around 10 years after The Intelligent Investor was one written by Phil Fisher. It's called Common Stocks and Uncommon Profits. And this book, I believe, is incredible. This one, I think, even though it was released a long time ago, like The Intelligent Investor, I actually believe that the principles it shares are far more evergreen. They're far more timeless. They're fully applicable to today. Common Stocks and Uncommon Profits goes over a lot of things that are more principled, like when to buy a stock, when to sell a stock. He lays out 3 different reasons to sell a stock, which are fully applicable today. The reasoning hasn't changed one bit. It's all about having good judgment on which type of companies to hold. And out of all of these investors, Phil Fisher was the OG quality investor. He was the one seeking extremely high quality companies, holding them for long periods of time, and not getting wrapped into trying to buy undervalued companies that are worse off. He understood that quality compounders will continue to compound for decades, and he had the results to show it. Benjamin Graham did a great job exploiting different value propositions, buying companies that were undervalued or under their book value. But that investing process doesn't work so great today. Phil Fisher's process still works great today. And buying quality companies is what Buffett ended up doing the majority of his career. In fact, Buffett credits Phil Fisher, and he transitioned a lot to Phil Fisher's type of investing throughout his career, paying more money for companies like See's Candy, Geico, Amex, Coca-Cola, and Apple. All of Buffett's biggest winners are extremely high quality companies bought at reasonable prices. The exact type of investing that Phil Fisher outlines. Now, moving on from that, we have a book here in a different category called One Buck at a Time. It is the story of Dollar Tree. So if you want to read about Dollar Tree, how the company started, how the economics of it work, how it scaled to massive size, to billions of dollars worth, and how it was kind of an underdog. Wall Street never really took this company seriously. It's all the story of Dollar Tree, one buck at a time. I think this one is probably worth the time. It wasn't terrible, but it also wasn't life-changing or super motivating. It didn't really change my perspective on anything. So this one I put firmly in the C tier. Next up, we have the massive biography on Warren Buffett's life called The Snowball. This is supposed to be the most definitive and complete biography on Warren Buffett's life. That reveals a lot of interesting things about him, his personality, and especially the theme of compounding all throughout his life. I thought it was a fantastic book, really well written. I thought overall it was pretty comprehensive on his life as well. It's 24 hours long on Audible, so this is a very long one. You have to commit to it if you really want to listen to his life that long. But it did move along pretty quickly. It moved from one subject to a next, so I thought it was overall very interesting. The only criticism that I would give this book, and the reason that I don't think it's S tier, is I thought overall it was a little bit too cheerleading for Warren Buffett. A true biography should share more of the negatives, more of the flaws in the person. This one did share some flaws, some negatives, but overall it was a bit too glowing. It was almost like it was cheering on Warren Buffett, not giving a 100% accurate view. But overall, very good. I give it an A tier. The next two books are both written by Peter Lynch, and I'm going to throw both of these up in S tier. I think these are two of the best books ever written on investing by one of the best investors ever to share his thoughts on investing. And I think that they're still highly applicable to today. Not every single chapter and every formula is applicable, but Peter Lynch's attitude of doing on-the-ground research, finding your edge, beating out Wall Street, not believing the naysayers that say you can never beat the market, the way that he focuses on stocks and breaks them down, his thoughts on bonds compared to stocks, all of it is incredibly motivating, interesting, informative. These are books that you can read multiple times and still get value out of them. Out of the two, I personally like Beating the Street more because that was the first one I read and it was the first one that got me extremely excited about investing. Next up, we have a book called No Rules Rules: Netflix and a Culture of Reinvention by Reed Hastings and Aaron Meyer. So this was written by the CEO and founder of Netflix, Reed Hastings, and it was basically a book about the culture of Netflix. Very specific. And it's not much of a novel. It's not really there to entertain you. It's simply if you want to see the culture of a company. So if you're interested in the culture of Netflix, you can just read the book. There's a few interesting things in Netflix's culture that I've actually taken and applied to my investing. For example, one of the things that Reed Hastings outlined is that Netflix is a team, not a family. And that's an important distinction because family is there because you love them. Family, you don't get to choose. Family, you don't get to recruit. You're born into a family, you have relatives, you might marry into a family, but once you have your family, they're family. Family, you're supposed to treat differently than others. You're supposed to love them unconditionally. Yeah, you can have disagreements, but you're supposed to stick together. After all, you're family. That's not what Netflix wanted to treat their culture like. They would tell employees, you're not family, you are a team, and we treat this like a team. A team means that everyone has to be at the top of their game. Everyone needs to be trying their best. A team is only as good as the weakest link. And if a team member is not pulling their weight, they're going to be replaced with another one on the bench, just like you would at an NBA game or an NFL or any other team. You want to assemble the best team possible. So Netflix did that with their culture. Netflix only wanted the best on their team. And if you couldn't perform, if you couldn't do the job really well, they would send you packing with a nice severance package. And I do the same thing with my portfolio. I view it as a team, not a family. Every single holding in my portfolio is there because they are performing. They're at the top of their game. They're the best team members. As soon as they break a leg or they can't do the job anymore, I'm going to replace them with another player. I don't view my portfolio like a family. I don't think you should either. So there's some interesting takeaways from this book, and you can read more about Netflix's culture if you're interested in that. Now, next up, we have a book called Amazon Unbound, which goes through Jeff Bezos' life and the founding of Amazon, the culture of Amazon and the team. I'm going to put this one as D tier because I really didn't enjoy the book. And I know it's hard to say that because I think Jeff Bezos is incredible what he started. I have a huge investment in Amazon. I have every reason to have liked this book, but unfortunately, it just didn't catch my attention. The writing style and the pacing I thought was very slow. It was a little bit of a grind to get through. So it wasn't one that I really enjoyed reading. I wouldn't read it again. There are other books that I think are more interesting. The one after that is Richer, Wiser, Happier. This one I think is S tier. I think Richer, Wiser, Happier is one of the best investing books to come out in the past decade. It's fairly recent, but it goes over a lot of great investors. Investors like Monish Pabrai, how he started investing, how he got into the situation he is, Sir John Templeton, Nick Sleep and Zachariah, and many more. You get to read about the stories of so many great investors. It's incredibly motivating, and you get to see the commonalities in how they viewed value, how they compounded wealth, how they all had commonalities with their temperament, with their patience, all the things that allowed them to have better performance than the average. So Richer, Wiser, Happier, I put S tier. I think it's a great book, entertaining. It's short and concise. It's not one that's going to lose your attention span. And at the same time, it's also enlightening, and I think it can even change your perspective on investing. So that one I highly recommend as well. Now, next up, we have a book called Range. This is one that I also recommend. I think it's very good, even though this isn't necessarily an investing book. It's a book about psychology and temperament and personality and accomplishing things. The reason I like the book Range is because it challenges a common belief. The belief that in order to become great at something, you have to practice it for 10,000 hours. That was a belief started by Malcolm Gladwell. He wrote a lot about that. In order to become truly great and a master at something, you need 10,000 hours of practice behind it. Well, the author of Range believes that it's actually more advantageous to have a wide range of skills, to have lots of experiences in different fields doing different things. He says that it gives you more context, more ideas, more things to base your knowledge off of. And in fact, the people that just pigeonhole into one thing, doing 10,000 hours of one thing and never focusing on anything else, are less successful than the people that have a wider range of skill sets. And he has a lot of data, a lot of information, a lot of studies to back that up. So this one is more of a thought experiment. It's something where you can read it and it changes the way that you might think about studying something. It highlights how many people that are extremely successful in science or technology have a wide range of skills. So that one's a book about generalists and having variety. And I think it's also very applicable to investments. Now, another psychology book that I think is incredibly good is The Psychology of Money by Morgan Housel. This one has made the waves recently. I had to read it because I kept hearing about it, and I thought it lived up to the hype. I just think it's a great book. It teaches you about why different people make different decisions, with the underlying theme that nobody's crazy. So if someone's making some investing decision, there's reason and context behind that decision. Things that they've experienced in their life that you haven't, that are causing them to do that with their money. And the entire purpose of the book is showing how psychology drives the decisions you make with money. Not stats, not logic, not objectiveness. It's all back to psychology and experiences. The other book that he authored, this one I'm around halfway through. I think it's also very good. I'll put it as B tier right now. It's called Same as Ever, and again, authored by Morgan Housel. So they both have the same writing style. They're both very short and concise. They move along quickly. But I think The Psychology of Money so far was a bit more powerful of a book than Same as Ever. Now, next up, we have The Big Short by Michael Lewis. I know that most of you have probably seen the movie The Big Short. It has so many big actors in it, but I would recommend reading the book. This is one of those cases where the book, I think, is as good or better than the movie. It's truly a great book. It shows all of the stories of all the major players, Michael Burry, Steve Eisman, all of their backstory, how they got into investing. It talked a lot about Michael Burry's background in medicine and how he views the world. It's just a very interesting book by someone that had a lot of inside information around that time. Next up, we have Ride of a Lifetime by Bob Iger. I thought this one was interesting. It's an autobiography, so obviously it's going to talk about himself in a glowing way. But I thought it was interesting to see his experiences running Disney for such a long period of time. You can love him or hate him, but Bob Iger has had some very interesting experiences over the past couple of decades. The book starts off really with a punch. It starts off with him addressing the kid that was killed by an alligator in Florida on Disney property, how he had to deal with that, talking with the family, the entire event. So it starts off with a really dramatic story to tie you into it. Overall, I thought it was decent. I think it's a fun book to read. I think it's worth it if you're wanting to read something or listen to something to pass the time. But I would not say that this gives an accurate take of Bob Iger as a person, because of course it's going to be heavily biased. Now, after that, we have a book called Bad Blood, The Story of Theranos by John Carreyrou, who is the Wall Street Journal reporter that basically broke the entire case of Theranos. He's the one that really is responsible for all the dominoes falling. This book is phenomenal. It's great. The only reason it's not S tier is because I don't think it's life-changing. It doesn't change your whole perceptions of the world like these books can. But in terms of a story about fraud, about business, about someone wanting to achieve something great, getting into the minds of the people behind this, seeing the fallout of it, seeing the entire story broken by someone, it really is incredible. This one I highly recommend. Next up, we have Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. I'm putting this one as C tier. Neither great nor terrible. The book in and of itself, and let's leave the author out of it and his latest, what he's doing on Twitter right now. Let's leave that out of it and just judge the book for itself. The book by itself, I think, is a decent book. The whole purpose of it is illustrating that he has two dads. One of them was focused on becoming a professional, becoming a doctor, and just raising his income. The other one was focused on buying cash flow, buying rentals, earning dividends, and earning rental income. The one that was focused on the business aspect ended up being far more successful than the doctor. One was the rich dad, one was the poor dad. So the book in and of itself, I think, is great in the focus on cash flows, looking at things where if it doesn't bring you cash flows, it's basically an expense, right? He breaks it down in an interesting way. But the author has also seemingly gone off a deep end over the past decade. He's become a perma-bear. He doesn't focus on buying assets. He focuses his efforts on spreading doom and gloom on Twitter. So it's a shame what's happened to Robert Kiyosaki over the past decade, but I do think the book in and of itself is a half-decent book. Now we have two more books. One of them is called The Fund. This one was one that I was semi-excited about, but I ended up not even finishing the book. It didn't hold my attention. And I thought overall that it might be a good book, but it was not meant for me. I'm not the target audience here. The book seemed like it was going after Ray Dalio. It was just an attack on Ray Dalio, on his history. Some of the attack I think is warranted because Ray Dalio has done a lot of interesting things, but it breaks down Ray Dalio, his fund, how they tracked performance for people, a lot of the stuff that Ray Dalio doesn't want you to see. And that's basically how the book is pitched. This is all the stuff that the great Ray Dalio does not want you to see. But after a while, it just gets old bashing the same person. I just don't want to sit there and read 300 pages of a book bashing Ray Dalio. It's interesting at first, but I think my time could be spent a little bit better reading something else. So this one I'm going to put as D tier. If you really want to see a book that goes and looks at Ray Dalio from a more skeptical view and shows the things Ray Dalio doesn't want you to see, this book is for you. For me, I didn't find it that interesting. And then finally, we have The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks. This book I thought was very good. I'm going to put it as B tier. I think it was a decent book. I thought that Howard Marks did a good job compiling a lot of his memos and his thoughts, putting it into an organized book. I think it goes through a lot of that type of stuff that Howard Marks routinely talks about in his memos. Second level thinking, all this abstract type of stuff. And I thought the psychology behind it is really good. If I had one criticism for the book, I thought it was a bit repetitive. So it went over a lot of the same themes in different ways, but it felt like it was, a lot of things that I've already heard. So I thought this one was decent. I'll put it as B tier. So there you have it, 18 different investing books. I've ranked them best to last. I highly recommend all of these ones on S tier. I think all of them are great. Let me know if you agree with the rankings and what books I should be reading next. That's all for this time. See you in the next one.